Let's see what really happened.
Let's begin our investigation into aviation's greatest mystery. Scene transition music, quick montage of old planes, stormy seas and newspaper headlines. The legend of the phantom plane is about to be put to the test.
Is this story true or just a myth people love to tell? To find out, we need to separate fact from fiction. We'll explore the real history of Flight 19, how the legend started, and why it became so popular. Sometimes the search for truth is more fascinating than the myth itself.
The myth says one of those planes landed in Mexico decades later. The control tower saw an old propeller plane on radar. It landed perfectly, but the cockpit was empty. All they found was a 1945 calendar and a half-eaten sandwich.
The legend is often linked to a real event. On December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy planes, Flight 19, disappeared over the Atlantic. No wreckage, no survivors, just mystery. The real story's strangeness inspired even wilder tales.
Have you ever heard a story so strange it makes you question reality? One of aviation's greatest legends is about a phantom plane. The story claims an airplane can vanish without a trace. Then, years later, reappear, looking brand new but with no pilots aboard. It lands by itself, a silent ghost from the past. This tale has fascinated people for decades, blending wonder and fear.
Let's see how the myth was born.
That's the story we'll unravel next. The truth is out there if you know where to look.
But how did a real-life tragedy become a supernatural legend?
The disappearance of Flight 19 became one of aviation's greatest mysteries. The real tragedy was soon overshadowed by speculation and myth. The facts were strange enough to inspire legends.
The Navy launched a massive search. A rescue plane with 13 men also disappeared, likely exploding mid-air, as reported by a nearby ship. These rescue planes were known for fuel leaks and accidents. Hundreds of ships and planes searched thousands of square miles. No wreckage, no life rafts, no sign of the missing men.
The real story of Flight 19 starts on a clear afternoon in Florida, December 5, 1945. 5 Navy Avenger bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale for a routine training flight. Their leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, was experienced but new to the area. The other 13 men were student pilots. At first, everything was normal, but then, Taylor radioed the base. He was lost, his compasses weren't working. He thought he was over the Florida Keys, far south of his actual position. The other pilots were confused too. Radio messages grew more desperate as the weather worsened and night fell. Taylor decided to fly east, thinking it would bring them to land. But they were already over the Atlantic. Flying east took them farther out to sea. The last radio message was faint. Then, silence. The 5 planes and 14 men vanished.
The myth was about to get even stranger.
The legend was set, but soon, people claimed to see the phantom plane for themselves.
The real tragedy faded, replaced by a story that was more exciting and less true.
People wanted to believe in something mysterious.
The myth of the phantom plane was now part of pop culture.
The legend became more famous than the real story.
The media played a huge role. A best-selling book in 1974 presented Flight 19 as an unsolved paranormal mystery, leaving out key facts.
The myth grew with every retelling. Aliens, time portals, and government cover-ups entered the story.
But in the 1960s, writers began to spin the story into something supernatural. Magazines and books dubbed the area the Bermuda Triangle. Authors added dramatic, invented radio messages like, "We are entering white water, nothing seems right." These weren't in the official reports.
At first, Flight 19's disappearance was seen as a tragic accident, pilot error and bad weather. Let's examine the evidence.
It's time to separate fact from fiction.
But what does the evidence really say?
The myth became a magnet for believers and skeptics alike.
The legend grew with every retelling, each new story adding another layer of mystery.
The lack of wreckage fueled these ideas.
Conspiracy theories flourished. Some said the government was hiding the truth, or that a secret weapon or alien encounter was involved.
People claimed to hear faint messages about being lost or seeing strange lights. None of these stories were ever verified. Radio signals can get mixed up, and the mind can play tricks.
Other stories told of ghostly pilots haunting the old naval base, or strange radio signals echoing the lost pilots' voices.
The story claimed the plane landed itself, cockpit empty, with a 1945 calendar inside. No official records, no credible witnesses, just a sensational headline.
Once the myth took hold, reports of phantom planes began to surface. The most famous, a plane from Flight 19 landing in Mexico, reported by a tabloid in the 1980s. So what really happened to Flight 19?
But the facts are clear, there's no phantom plane.
The legend survives because it's a better story.
The real story is about human error, bad luck, and the power of nature.
But the evidence points to a tragic accident, not a ghost story.
Myths ignore these facts because the truth isn't as exciting.
The Atlantic is vast and deep. Finding wreckage in 1945 was nearly impossible. Planes would have sunk quickly and currents could carry debris far away. The lack of wreckage isn't proof of the supernatural. It's proof of how unforgiving the ocean can be.
The phantom plane myth falls apart under scrutiny. The Mexico landing story? No official records, no credible witnesses, just a tabloid tale. The dramatic radio messages? Not in the Navy transcripts. The real messages show lost, confused pilots, not supernatural events. The weather? It turned stormy, with high winds and rough seas. Details often left out of the myth.
Why do we believe in phantom planes?
But the legend endures.
The real story is about human error and the unforgiving sea, not the supernatural.
Two tragedies became one legend.
The Martin Mariner rescue plane probably exploded due to a known mechanical fault.
The men would not have survived long in the cold water.
The planes likely crashed into the stormy Atlantic and sank quickly.
When the first plane ran out of fuel, Taylor planned to ditch all planes together.
The student pilots followed their leader, even as fuel ran low and the weather worsened.
Lieutenant Taylor made a navigational error, thinking he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually over the Bahamas. He distrusted his compasses and led his flight further out to sea.
The most likely explanation comes from the Navy's investigation.
That's why we need to look deeper.
But a good story isn't always the truth.
The core elements, a mysterious disappearance, a ghostly return, a cover-up, are irresistible. We tell these stories to entertain, to warn, and to make sense of a confusing world.
Myths survive because they're great stories, passed down, retold, and reshaped.
Stories like this give shape to our anxieties and make them easier to handle.
Fear of the unknown also plays a role. The idea of vanishing without a trace is deeply unsettling.
Believing in the impossible makes life more interesting. It's a way to escape reality and imagine a world where anything can happen.
Myths give us wonder and a sense of magic in a world that often feels ordinary.
Mystery excites us. When there's no clear answer, our imagination fills the gaps. A ghost plane is more thrilling than a simple accident.
Why are we drawn to stories like the phantom plane?
The truth is worth finding.
Always look for the real evidence behind the tale.
Stories can shape what we believe, but that doesn't make them true.
That's why it's important to check our sources and question what we hear.
This is how folklore is born.
Over time, fact and fiction blur.
Most people aren't trying to deceive, they just repeat what they've heard.
The myth turns tragedy into legend.
The idea of a plane returning after decades gives hope, even if it's not logical.
Myths win because they're easier to remember and share.
The real story is complex navigational errors, bad weather, and human mistakes.
The legend of the phantom plane is simple, emotional, and mysterious.
A good story can be more powerful than facts. The search for truth is the greatest adventure of all. End credits.
By seeking truth, we find deeper understanding.
Ask, where did this story come from? What's the evidence? The world is full of real wonders and mysteries.
Next time you hear a mysterious story, let it spark your imagination and your curiosity.
The truth is more satisfying and respectful to those involved.
The answers were about weather, machines, and mistakes, not aliens or time portals.
Investigating the Bermuda Triangle meant digging through records and talking to experts.
The story of Flight 19 is interesting because it's a mystery. True curiosity means asking questions and seeking evidence.
But curiosity is vital. It drives us to explore, learn, and discover.
The myth of a ghost plane isn't real. The truth is about human error and nature's power.
We've seen how facts were changed and new details invented.
The legend of the phantom plane is a journey from tragedy to myth.